revealed how one incredible doctor risked everything to transform a dying millionaire's last days. In a town where struggle was stitched into the fabric of daily life, Dr. Sarah Thompson stood like a beacon of hope. Her warm smile and unwavering dedication to her patients defined her as more than just a physician. She was a lifeline. Every late night spent at her clinic meant comforting hands, dirt-stained faces, and hearts backed against the wall. But on that fateful afternoon, everything changed. Just outside the clinic, a man staggered and collapsed. The townsfolk gasped, their eyes wide with shock. It was Thomas Langston, a reclusive millionaire known more for his wealth than his character. Eyes filled with disdain, whispers turned into a cacophony of judgment. "Look at him," one woman remarked. "Worth a fortune but has nothing to show for it." A man with a weathered face spat, "Fortunes can't save you when you've lost your soul." A thick cloud of skepticism hung heavy in the air. Yet Sarah felt her heart race not out of fear but out of compassion. Sarah raced to Thomas's side, her hands steady but her heart a storm of tumult. She could hear the gasps and murmurs around her. While the community saw his riches as a symbol of greed, she saw a man crumbling under the weight of loneliness. As she worked to stabilize him, every second mattered. "Stay with me, Mr. Langston," she urged, as she moved deftly, trying to keep the fading life alive in his body. He opened his eyes, the glimmer of vulnerability piercing the armor of his wealth. "I just want to see my son," he gasped. Sarah felt her chest tighten. Memories of her own family flooded her mind, every laugh, every tear, every moment that weaved their lives together. She realized then, money was but a poor substitute for love. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every pulse of the machines, Sarah felt the weight of the community's expectations. What if she saved him? Would they see him as a monster or a man capable of redemption? Their scorn pressed in on her like a vice. But there was a flicker in Thomas, a longing for connection. He was more than his bank account. He was a father yearning for forgiveness. As days passed, Thomas's condition remained critical, tied to a web of choices that threatened to unravel them both. The town buzzed with chatter, each word more biting than the last. How could she defend a man deemed unworthy in their eyes? Yet, with each treatment, Sarah felt a kinship grow, an understanding of human fragility regardless of status. What if a second chance at love could heal a shattered family, or mend the brokenness in her own heart? With determination growing like wildfire, Sarah understood that this was not just about saving a life. It was about challenging a community's beliefs. As she faced the clock, the stakes were high. Would she be the one to bridge the gap between wealth and worth? The air hummed with tension, and with every heartbeat, she knew they were both standing at the edge of a precipice waiting for a decision that could change everything. Would she forsake comfort for conviction? The next move felt monumental, and the town's gaze bore down heavily, unaware of the journey that lay tangled within the life of a dying millionaire. The question loomed, and as she looked at Thomas, the weight of what he might lose and what she might gain hung in the air, thick with possibility. The room was stifling. The continuous beep of the heart monitor stood out against the hushed whispers of the nursing staff. It was a sound Sarah had heard countless times, but this one felt different. Each beep echoed the urgency of their situation and her growing resolve. She knew Thomas Langston might not have much time left. Each day brought new challenges, not only in caring for his health but also in grappling with the heavy judgment from the town. She could feel their eyes on her, scrutinizing every decision. Hadn't they spent years painting him as a monster, devoid of love? Yet, as she looked down at Thomas, frail and vulnerable, she saw beyond the wealth. She saw a father desperate to reconnect with his son, aching for a second chance at life. One evening, as dusk wrapped the clinic in twilight, she found herself seeking solace by the window. The townspeople were gathering outside, murmurs stirring like a wind before a storm. She peered through the glass and spotted familiar faces: farmers, shopkeepers, the local school janitor. They had grown accustomed to her caring touch, yet the sight of Thomas revived old feelings, buried beneath years of resentment. "Dr. Thompson!" A voice called, and she turned to find Clara, a nurse she had mentored. "They're talking. Some want to protest his treatment. They think he doesn't deserve your care." Sarah sighed, her heart a mix of frustration and resolve. "Clara, all I see is a man who needs help, just like anyone else." Her fingers tightened around the curtain. "If we refuse to treat him, aren't we just as guilty as we accuse him of being?" Clara shook her head, unsure. "But he has done terrible things, Sarah. What if this is a waste? What if he can change?" Sarah interrupted, her voice firm. "What if this is his chance to make things right?" As much as she wanted to convince Clara and herself these were uncharted waters, she felt uncertainty creeping in. She was in this alone, and that realization weighed heavy on her shoulders. In the late hours, Sarah found herself at Thomas's bedside again. The stillness was punctuated only by the rhythmic sound of the machine. Leaning in, she whispered, "Don't give up on me yet." As if he could hear her, he opened his eyes. "You," he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "My son, I need him." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Can you tell me about him? Maybe I can help." Thomas hesitated, considering. "He hates me," he gasped, "and I don't blame him." "Why?" she asked, fully engaged now, desperate to navigate this emotional terrain with him. "Because I pushed him away, chose wealth over family." Each confession cut deeper than the last. In that moment, Sarah recognized the truth. His wealth hadn't protected him, it had isolated him. But as she listened to Thomas unravel the tale of his shortcomings, she realized she could be more than just a doctor. She could be the bridge between father and son. Would Thomas's son accept his dying father's wish for forgiveness? And then there it was, a flicker of hope. If she could reach out, if she could somehow convince that boy his father was worth a second chance. The thought sent her heart racing. As she glanced at the heart monitor, then back to Thomas, she felt a new strength surging through her. The next step was vital. Would she take the risk to unite a family torn apart? Or would she let the judgment of others seal Thomas's fate? With one final glance at Thomas, Sarah knew what she had to do next. The battle for redemption had just begun, but could it be fought in time? The morning light filtered through the clinic windows, sprinkling warmth across the stark white walls. Sarah had hardly slept, her mind whirling with possibilities. She headed to the nurse's station, determined to put plan into motion. She could no longer just be a doctor, she would become a lifeline. "Clara," she called gently, finding her at the desk with a heavy load of paperwork. "We need to talk." Clara looked up, concern etched on her face. "About what? Thomas?" "Yes," Sarah replied, biting her lip. "I want to reach his son, Blake. I think it's crucial for his recovery. But I need your support. We have to convince him to come here." Clara hesitated, a frown knitting her brow. "You really believe that will make a difference?" "I do." Sarah felt the weight of her words pushing into existence a vision of what might be. "He deserves this chance, and so does Blake. It's risky, but it could change everything." As the morning moved into afternoon, Sarah barely noticed the hours fly by. She drafted a letter, pouring her heart into every word. She didn't know Blake, but she could imagine his hurt and anger. She hoped her messages of forgiveness would resonate with him. Taking a deep breath, she sealed the envelope and handed it to Clara. "Will you deliver this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Clara took the envelope with a nod, skepticism still lingering in her eyes. "I'll do it, but I don't know if it'll matter. He may not come." Sarah felt a flicker of doubt but brushed it aside. "We have to try. I believe it can reach him." Hours stretched, and the shadows grew long. The heart monitor rhythmically beeping had become a friend, an anchor she turned to in the silence. But the moment of peace shattered when a gripping shout echoed through the hallways. "Get out of here! He doesn't deserve to be alive!" Sarah's heart sank as she rushed out, her mind racing. Outside the clinic, a crowd had begun to form, wielding signs that carried words like monster and no mercy. Clara stood, stunned, at the epicenter of the chaos. "Sarah, what do we do?" she shouted over the growing uproar. For a moment, Sarah saw only the raging sea of emotions, confusion, and anger. She took a step forward, raising her hands, her doctor's demeanor rising to the surface. "Everyone, please. Listen. He is still a human being." The shouting only escalated, and people began to chant. Sarah felt her heart racing, fear clashing with determination. How could she make them understand? "Listen to me," she yelled, her voice ringing with urgency. "This isn't just about him. This is about healing. We all deserve a second chance." But the noise enveloped her, muffling the hope brewing inside. She glanced back at Thomas's room, worrying her fingers against a piece of fabric. The thought crossed her mind, was she fighting a losing battle? Just when the noise peaked, someone stepped forward surprisingly. It was a familiar face, Mr. Dawson, the town's clerk. "Everyone, let us give her a moment," he called out. The crowd quieted, eyes shifting toward him. "I understand your anger. Believe me, we have every reason to despise this man. But what if he is asking for redemption?" "Redemption?" someone spat back. "He'd have to show it first." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "That's just it. He is ready to change. He needs his son, and maybe his son needs him too. We can't lock him away like a monster forever. We owe it to all of us to take this chance." She stood there, feeling a swell of emotion laden with desperation. Would they listen? As murmurs grew in intensity, she wished for a sign, something that would help her break through the walls of spite surrounding Thomas Langston. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Clara. Sarah's heart pounded. Had Blake replied? With thousands of wild thoughts rushing through her mind, she felt hope and fear collide. As she quickly opened it, she pushed away invisible barriers, ready to embrace whatever news awaited her. Would this be the turning point they desperately needed? Or just another moment lost in bitterness? The crowd thickened, hearts hanging in the balance, waiting for an answer that could change everything. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the screen, trying to steady her breath. The words jumped out at her. Blake Langston was on his way. "Clara!" she shouted, excitement coursing through her veins. The crowd around her seemed to dissolve into a blur, their noise fading into the background. "He is coming!" Clara's face shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Are you serious?" she asked, her eyes wide. "He actually agreed?" Sarah nodded, barely able to contain her joy. But then a new wave of anxiety washed over her. Would Blake truly be willing to hear his father's side? Would he even care, after everything that had happened? The crowd had not dispersed, their rage still palpable. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to channel her energy into something constructive. "Everyone, please," she said again, this time with renewed confidence. "We have a chance for dialogue." A woman in the front, holding a sign that read "Justice for the Victims," shouted, "What makes you think he deserves it? He took everything from us." "He took nothing from me," Sarah replied, surprised at her own boldness bubbling to the surface. "He is still a person. We don't know the depths of his remorse or the pain he has felt. Let us give both sides a fair chance. Let us not judge before we know the whole story." The crowd exchanged glances, a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. "Redemption doesn't come easy," Mr. Dawson chimed in again, voice steady as ever. "But healing can start with forgiveness. If Blake comes, it will be for his own reasons. Maybe because he believes he can make a difference, too." The murmurs in the crowd began to soften. Sarah felt a fresh wave of determination. This was her chance to show everyone the beauty of redemption, a lesson not just for Thomas, but for all of them. Suddenly, the clinic doors swung open, and Sarah's heart raced as she spotted a young man stepping out of the crowd. Blake. He looked like the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. Brown hair tousled, eyes searching, he stood there, taking in the chaos around him. "Blake!" Sarah called out, relief washing over her. She stepped closer, ready to bridge the gap. Thank you for coming. Blake met her gaze, his expression mixed with uncertainty and pain. Is he really? His voice trailed off, and the courage he mustered faltered for a moment. Yes, she said gently, her heart throbbing as she thought of the bond they were trying to rebuild. He wants to talk to you. He is ready. He hesitated, scanning the crowd, feeling their hostility. But as Sarah watched, she could see the glimmers of something in his eyes: curiosity, fear, perhaps even a flicker of hope. The atmosphere shifted, and for the first time, the echoes of anger felt less thunderous, almost quaking in the presence of something deeper. Why should I bother? He shot back, raw emotion spilling out. What if he just wants to manipulate me? I'm not sure I can trust him. Sarah stepped forward, urgency rising within her. Because it's not just about him. It's about you. You deserve closure, Blake. And like it or not, he is still your father. Let us find out what he has to say. You might discover more than you think. The crowd watched intently, breaths held as Blake's internal battle played out. Would he take the chance to hear the words he had longed for? Finally, he bowed his head, his voice barely a whisper. Fine. Let us do this. Hope surged through Sarah as she gestured for Blake to follow her. This was at the moment they'd all been waiting for, the turning point that might mend broken pieces of their lives. As they approached the door, another shout erupted from the crowd. You can't just let him walk away. Sarah turned, resolve solidifying deep inside her. This isn't just about Thomas. It's also about healing for all of us. We all need to choose change. With those words, she stepped forward, heart racing, unsure of what awaited them inside. But as the door closed behind them, a moment of silence fell over the congregation, holding their breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. Would healing begin now, or were they all still trapped? In pain? Inside the clinic, the air was thick with tension. Sarah led Blake down a dimly lit corridor, her heart pounding. Every footstep felt monumental, as if they were walking toward a life-altering decision both for Blake and for those waiting outside. Blake's face was a canvas of emotions, a fierce clash of anger and longing. What if he hurts me again? What if this is just another game to him? His voice was shaky, revealing the turmoil beneath his bravado. She stopped, turning to him. What if he doesn't? What if he is truly ready to make amends? She searched his eyes for understanding. This is more than just about him. It's about you, Blake. You deserve peace. Blake's shoulders sank as he leaned against the wall, contemplating her words. Peace? How can I have peace with a father who doesn't even know my name, save for the pain he has caused? The vulnerability in his voice was clear, and it stirred something deep within Sarah. I know it feels impossible right now, but sometimes facing our fears is how we find our freedom, she said softly. It was a reminder not just for him, but for herself as well. Wouldn't they all be a little freer if they chose to let go, even if only a little? They reached the waiting room, a small area with worn chairs and flickering fluorescent lights, where Thomas sat, an island of solitude amid the chaos that had surrounded him. The heaviness of his presence filled the room, and it was as if all the air had been sucked out in anticipation of this meeting. He looked up, his voice shaky. Blake, thank you for coming. His eyes shimmered with a mixture of guilt and hope. For a long moment they stood, the silence loud and thick, a chasm between them that seemed insurmountable. Blake shifted uncomfortably, anger flaring before he took a deep breath to steady himself. You don't get to thank me. You lost that right a long time ago. His words were sharp, but they hung in the air, undeniably filled with unspoken hurt. Sarah took a small step back, letting them breathe in the moment. She felt the tension crackling like static electricity between father and son, and she wished desperately that her presence could ease the burden. But this was their journey to navigate. Please just hear me out, Thomas pleaded. The desperation in his voice tugged at Sarah's heartstrings. You were my everything, Blake. I know I failed you in ways I'll never be able to fix. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I've thought about it every single day. The pain I caused it's never left me. Blake's gaze hardened, his jaw clenched. You think an apology is enough? He shot back, bitterness dripping from his words. How can I trust your words when your actions said otherwise? What do you want from me? Thomas asked, sweat beading at his brow. Blake took a step closer, anger bubbling over. How about honesty? How about you tell me what happened? Blake, be careful, Sarah tried to interject, but it faltered. This was necessary. This chaos felt like the prelude to something vital for them both. In that suffocating silence, something shifted. It was a flicker of vulnerability breaking through. I can't change what has happened, Thomas whispered. But I want to share my side why it happened. As Blake stared into his father's eyes, a mix of emotions washed over his face. Uncertainty still loomed, but there was a hint of something else, curiosity, more than anger, and possibly the faintest trace of hope. For the first time in what seemed like ages, he hesitated. Was he ready to hear what could fracture them more or perhaps heal? Just then, a loud crashing sound erupted from outside, breaking the tension. Sarah's heart raced as she glanced toward the waiting area, and Blake's amber eyes flared wide in alarm. What was that? He whispered, dread creeping into his voice. A moment of truth awaited them, not just inside the clinic, but out there, beyond those walls. Would they emerge from this moment changed, no matter the outcome? The shift in the air was undeniable. An unexpected revelation was brewing, one they couldn't have anticipated. But what would it unveil? The sound of shattering glass sliced through the thick air, sending a chill racing down Sarah's spine. For a brief moment, all thoughts of reconciliation vanished, replaced by a swirl of panic. Blake instinctively moved closer to her, his body tense and anxious. What is happening? He muttered, scanning the waiting room. The muted chatter of the clinic seemed to dissolve, and the only sound was the pounding of their hearts. Sarah's instinct kicked in. She reached for the door, her hand already on the knob, but Blake stopped her. No, wait, he urged. We don't know what's out there. The urgency in his voice ignited an instinct within her. If knowledge was power, then she needed to understand what was going on outside these walls. They needed to face whatever was about to unfold together. She nodded, signaling that they would stand firm. Stay close, she whispered, her voice steadier than she felt. They stepped through the door and into the bright sunlight. What they encountered left them momentarily stunned. A car had skidded off the road and crashed into the nearby trees, its metal frame crumpled like paper. A small crowd had gathered, their expressions a mixture of shock and concern. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every second. Blake's eyes were wide with horror. Is anyone hurt? His voice wavered as he took a cautious step toward the chaos. The car's back door was ajar, and in that instant, a woman stumbled out, crying and shouting for help. Stay back! A man shouted, emerging from the group. He looked disheveled but determined as he rushed toward the woman, the panic of the moment painting vivid strokes of emotion on everyone's faces. Sarah's heart pounded not just for the woman but for Blake. This was a reality he had worked so hard to escape, a fracture they had just begun to navigate inside the clinic. Yet here it was, a fresh reminder of the chaos that family pain could create. Let us go, Blake said, ready to rush toward the scene. Sarah grabbed his arm, feeling the raw emotion surging between them. Wait. Let them handle it first, she implored. She saw how the encounter affected Blake. It was like watching a dam begin to crack under pressure. Emotions about his own father, about his past, were bubbling up again. But he shook his head, determination gleaming in his eyes. I have to know if she is okay, he insisted. He pulled free and darted forward, absorbing the fear of the unknown like a sponge. As Sarah watched him move, she felt fear mixed with admiration. He was stepping into the chaos, seeking answers not just for the woman but for himself. It was as if the weight of his father's presence had momentarily lifted, replaced by a burning need to act, to connect, to hold on to the fragments of humanity around him. Then, in a heartbeat, Blake turned around, his expression changing. Sarah! He shouted, his voice urgent but softer, almost pleading. What if that could be us? The reality of it struck her, a search for connection, a desire to heal, even amid the wreckage of life. Sarah's breath hitched as she realized the weight of his words. Beyond forgiveness, they both needed courage to confront not just the past but also the unpredictable future. At that moment, everything felt precarious. They stood on the brink of something new, the outside world crashing against their delicate moment inside. Would they choose to take the plunge into the unknown together or retreat into the safety of the past? The sirens blared closer, cutting through the intensity of their shared moment. The air crackled with uncertainty, holding the promise of either hope or chaos. "Are you ready to face whatever comes next?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He met her gaze, and for an instant, it felt like their destinies intertwined on that precipice. The answer might change everything again. But before he could respond, another loud crash echoed through the trees. The uncertainty of what lay ahead thickened in the air like fog, and they both knew that this was just the beginning. The new crash echoed ominously, sending a jolt through Sarah's chest. She squinted, trying to see beyond the trees as a rush of adrenaline sharpened her every sense. Blake was already moving, his legs carrying him swiftly toward the wreckage, a blur of determination and fear. "Blake, wait!" Sarah shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the sirens, the sound rising to a fever pitch. In her chest, a knot of dread tightened. She felt a sense of urgency to stop him, yet there was something equally compelling about letting him take that step forward. Blake didn't. He turned back, his focus locked onto the scene. The crowd was beginning to part, letting out gasps of shock as onlookers whispered urgent questions among themselves. She could see the woman on the ground, crumpled and shaky, the disheveled man kneeling beside her, trying to comfort her. The scene was chaotic, and the palpable fears shifted into something darker, more dangerous. As Blake approached, Sarah felt her heart race. "He's going to get too close," she thought. She could see how the accident was taking its toll on him, the memories crashing like waves all around them, the fear of loss, the desire to save, the desperation to fix what was broken. "Blake!" She called again, now just a step behind him. In her mind, she wondered what she could say to get him to turn back, to understand that they weren't meant to jump into the fray. Their wounds were fresh. Diving into this chaos could reopen them both. But he didn't. He stopped. Instead, he knelt next to the woman, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're going to be okay," Blake said, his voice low and steady, yet the tremor betrayed his own turmoil. The warmth of his compassion radiated outwards, drawing the attention of nearby onlookers. "Is she hurt?" Blake continued, his gaze persistent yet gentle, searching for answers amid the chaos. A resonance of hope flickered in the air, providing a stark contrast to the oncoming turmoil. Sarah hesitated, uncertainty tightening around her lungs. The moment felt fragile, as if one misstep could send everything spiraling. She breathed in sharply, her arms wrapped around her middle, feeling the weight of everything they had faced coming to a head at this very moment. With each passing second, she could see the stricken expression on Blake's face, a reflection of emotions that went beyond just this accident. He was wrestling with a storm inside, attempting to reconcile his past and present while helping a stranger. The sirens were deafening now, the flashing lights casting unsettling shadows on the ground, bathing everything in a frantic glow. Blake turned around again, and for a split second she thought he would come back, but instead, he looked right at her. "I have to do this, Sarah. Please trust me," he said, eyes pleading. A sense of helplessness washed over her. She wanted to jump in, to pull him out of this emotional whirlpool, but she couldn't deny the determination in his voice. It was the same fire she had seen before, the same pull toward connection, into the unknown depths of human experience. "I trust you," she whispered, though doubt clung to the edges of each word. Suddenly, the crowd gasped again, and Sarah's head snapped toward the car. The man had reached for something inside the vehicle, his frantic movements stirring a primal fear deep within her. She glanced back at Blake, who was still focused on the woman, oblivious to the danger unfolding. Just then, a voice shouted, "Pull back! Evacuate the area!" The urgency shattered the moment, slicing through the tension that had enveloped them. Instinctively, Sarah stepped forward, ready to yank Blake back if necessary. The chaos surged around them, but as she moved, she felt her heart split open, welcoming the risk of danger. Maybe this was what they needed, a confrontation with fear, a graze with vulnerability that could only lead to something deeper. Blake! She called again, pushing through the crowd. We can't stay here. He turned, finally seeing the anxiety written all over her face, but a split second later, a distant, resonant crack reverberated through the air, louder than before. Everything changed in that moment as shadows crept closer and uncertainty loomed over them like a storm cloud. What had they stumbled into, and could they navigate this together? Before either could make a decision, an explosion of sound erupted from the wreckage. Suddenly, the world felt darker, and Sarah grabbed Blake's arm tightly, realizing they stood at the edge of something terrifying. What lay ahead could tear them apart or stitch them back together. Would they dare to find out? The explosion echoed like thunder, a shockwave of fears sweeping through the crowd. Sarah squeezed Blake's arm tighter, her heart pounding against her ribs. Chaos erupted in an instant. People were yelling, scrambling, and the once calm facade of the scene cracked wide open, revealing the raw panic beneath. Get back! Now! Shouted a firefighter, pushing through the throng. Blake, still crouched beside the woman, didn't move. His expression was one of fierce determination mixed with disbelief. Blake, please! Sarah implored, her voice nearly drowned out by the sirens and cries of confusion. The urgency in her tone broke through the haze of his focus, and he finally lifted his head to meet her frantic gaze. Sarah, I can help her, he insisted, his voice trembling but resolute. She needs someone. The woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing a mix of confusion and pain. Those moments stretched like eternity, as Blake searched for any signs of life within her broken frame. A single tear slipped down Sarah's cheek, filled with the weight of their shared past, the grief that still clung to them like smoke. Before she could respond, another explosion reverberated from the wreckage, sending a plume of smoke into the air. The heat and noise pushed the crowd back, some stumbling, while others shouted warnings. Fear took on a life of its own, and Sarah felt it grip her like a vice. No! She shouted as she felt a surge of protectiveness. Blake, we have to get out of here. She stepped closer, her instincts propelling her to bring him back from the edge. Everything within her screamed that this wasn't the time for heroics, that they had to survive first before they could help anyone else. The smoke began to curl around them, dark and thick, wrapping them away from the bright flashes of light and shouted commands. Sarah could hardly see. Her heart raced as a sense of dread settled in. What if something happened to Blake? What if their wounds reopened, as she feared they might? Just then, the woman gasped, drawing in a shaky breath. Her eyes met Blake's searching, pleading. Sarah felt the tears build again as she watched Blake grapple with the conflict between his desire to save and the dangerous reality they faced. As he hesitated, caught in the balance, Sarah could no longer just stand by. She stepped forward, gently placing her hands on his shoulders. Blake, let us get her out of here. Please! The heartfelt connection sparked an unspoken understanding between them. The past still lingered, yeah, but they were no longer drowning in it. Slowly, he turned back to her, and she could see the fight inside him begin to wane. He nodded, but it was uncertain. With the sound of sirens becoming an agonizing chorus, they both knew their choice was looming high above them like a storm. Let us go, he said, finally standing. He reached for the woman's hand, but before he could pull her gently from the ground, another loud noise erupted from the remains of the car, metal crumbling, glass shattering. Instinct took over as the crowd surged back. Sarah yanked Blake away just in time, pulling them both to safety behind a nearby patrol vehicle. The realization of what they had almost done hit hard. She looked back at the wreckage, her chest tightening. We can't just leave her, we'll have to wait for help. They'll be here, Blake insisted, his eyes scanning the chaos. There was a sense of urgency now, one that blended fear and resolve. Their lives were woven together once again, and they needed to protect this new thread they had begun to spin. The sky above them seemed to darken, filled with rolling clouds, and the sounds of chaos echoed all around. The flickering lights illuminated every worried face, revealing fear mirrored in those nearby. They stood together, embracing uncertainty. At that moment, Sarah felt something shift inside her. Perhaps this could be a turning point, a chance not just to heal but to be brave together. She took a breath, the hint of hope shimmering through the heavy air, and squeezed Blake's hand. "Whatever happens next, we face it together," she said. He nodded, and they watched as emergency crews finally began to arrive, their chance for real help. But then, an unexpected roar broke through the noise, another threat emerging, and just as their moment of safety felt assured, Sarah's heart dropped. Could they really face this new danger together? What awaited them in the dark? The roar grew louder, reverberating through the air like a war cry from the depths of the chaos. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she turned to Blake. His face reflected not just concern, but the unmistakable flicker of fear. The urgency of the moment pulled them both toward action. "Stay close," he shouted over the cacophony, his voice a lifeline in the tumult. They ducked behind the patrol vehicle, the wail of sirens mixing with the shouts of emergency responders rushing to the scene. Sarah's heart raced. She felt small amidst the chaos but clung to Blake as if he were an anchor in the roiling sea of panic. "Blake, what's going on?" She tried to keep her voice steady, but trembling edged her tone. The smoke hung thick in the air, sharp and acrid, making her want to gag. The visibility was fading, and looming shadows danced menacingly in the haze. Before he could answer, a nearby explosion sent a shockwave through the crowd, forcing people to stumble back. A woman cried out, clutching her child. Fear rippled infectious, from person to person, and Sarah felt it tingle down her spine. "Blake!" She grabbed his hand tighter, needing reassurance more than ever. "We can't stay here, we have to move." It was just her own safety she considered. It was the injured woman, the crowd, everyone around them forgotten in the face of survival. But Blake hesitated again, his eyes darting toward the wreckage, where the last echo of the explosion faded into an eerie silence. "What if we could help? What if Blake?" She interrupted, clutching his face with her hands, forcing him to look her in the eyes. "We can't help anyone if we're buried under that rubble. We need to survive first." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. The chaos faded to a distant murmur. The desperation washed over her. They had faced enough ghosts from the past, and she refused to let another take them both down. He nodded finally, yet uncertainty lingered in his brow. "You're right. Let us go. But I can't leave her behind." "We want tea," she promised, urgency now painting her words. "We'll find a way back. But for now, we have to be safe." With a firm grip, she pulled him to his feet. They dashed away from the vehicle just as the emergency lights cast shadows that flickered like fireflies in the dark, illuminating the evacuation route. Each hurried step echoed a silent vow to face what lay ahead together, side by side, despite the chaos swirling around them. As they made their way towards a safe distance from the explosion, Sarah glanced back, heart aching for the injured woman. She clung to the hope that help would arrive, that they hadn't abandoned someone who still needed saving. But the shadows of doubt loomed large, desperation clawed at her throat. The crowd around them was in a frenzy. Everyone pushed, pulled, and cried out for loved ones as they searched for their own safety. Among the chaos, Sarah spotted a group forming around something in the distance, an unmistakable flicker of orange flames licking the night air. It felt ominous, that flicker growing to a blaze. "What now?" she asked, her voice breaking through the noise as she turned to Blake. But he had already moved ahead, drawn like a moth to a flame. "Blake, wait!" she shouted, panic stitching through her as she chased after him. But he was lost in the urgency that surged within him. What she didn't expect was the sudden shift in their fate as he reached the crowd, stepping forward toward a potential new danger. She realized then how thin the line was between being a hero and a fool. Would he cross that line? And in doing so, would they both survive? The darkness began to close in around them, pulling tighter with each heartbeat. As Blake approached the growing flames, Sarah's heart raced. Blake, stop! She shouted again, her voice piercing through the chaos surrounding them. He turned back to her, eyebrows knitted, frustration and determination mingling with fear. I can't just stand by while someone might still need help, he countered, his eyes flickering between the flames and her anxious face. I know. But look at what's happening. We can't put ourselves in danger like this, she pleaded, the weight of her words clashing with their desperate situation. The fire raged nearby, crackling like laughter at their plight. It was a reminder of all they had faced, each desperate moment ripping through time and redefining their relationship. The air thickened with smoke, pressing down on them like a tangible weight. People are already rushing in, Sarah, he called out, his voice rising above the noise. They can't save everyone alone. Let them, she cried, stepping closer, her heart pounding to a frantic beat. We need to prioritize our safety first. Remember why we're doing this. He paused, the firelight casting shadows on his face, revealing doubts that danced behind his fierce determination. That moment felt suspended in time, a mix of urgency and uncertainty. He opened his mouth to argue again, but something shifted behind his eyes. Sarah, I want to help for so many reasons, he whispered, arm hanging limply at his side. For your dad? She asked softly, feeling the edge of her own vulnerability. This isn't just about him, or even this woman. This is about us too. That word hung between them, laden with promise and risk. It felt like holding hands at the edge of a cliff, ready to leap but unsure of where they would land. With every flickering flame, they both glimpsed a reflection of their own struggles, their pasts coming painfully to the surface. I don't want to lose you, Blake finally admitted, voice wavering. He looked at the flames, then back to her, a glimmer of understanding igniting within him. Then let's find a way to help without losing ourselves, she urged gently. We can be brave without being reckless. Together, we'll figure it out. He took a deep breath, shoulders relaxing under the weight of her words. It felt like a reset in us moment. The flames danced behind them, relentless, but within, they shared a fragile moment of clarity. Okay, he spoke finally, his voice steadier. Let us move away from here and reassess. Feeling the heartbeat of danger still echoing around them, they began to weave through the crowd, stepping back from the inferno as the sirens wailed louder, urgency pressing forward like a wave. As they reached a safer distance, Sarah turned toward the swirling chaos. It's hard to just watch when lives hang in the balance, she admitted, heart still fluttering. But helping each other is what matters most. I know, he replied quietly, gaze drifting toward the wreckage. I just feel like I can't escape what has haunted me for so long. Maybe facing this fear is how we break free, she suggested, intertwining her fingers with his. Forgiveness, healing, that's what it's about. For both of us and everyone else. The weight of their past lingered, but now it felt a little lighter, shared between them. Their fingers intertwined, a small act of solidarity against an unforgiving world. In that moment, they stepped into a new chapter, created by the intertwining of past pain with present courage. They decided to turn their gaze from the fire, toward each other, and the promise of what lay ahead. The depths of their shared emotion, a quickening heartbeat, and a shared path spurred them forward. Just then, from the distance, they heard a commotion, a blast of voices rising above the din, urging toward rescue and reform. The emergency crews were mounting their efforts, an organized endeavor against the chaos. Sarah's heart surged with hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end at all. This could be the beginning of something greater, not just for Thomas and Blake, but for the entire community. They could rise, transformed through the flames that threatened to consume them, turning loss into healing. Facing the swirling storm of flames and unrelenting challenge, Sarah squeezed Blake's hand tighter. Together, we can do this, she declared, fear mingling with newfound strength. Yes, he whispered back, a spark igniting in his eyes. As they turned back toward the flames, a cacophony of voices pressed forward behind them, and new opportunity crackled in the air. They were ready to bridge not just their pasts, but the entire community, to spark forgiveness and hope in the very heart of chaos. Because by coming together, they could overcome anything, not just as individuals, but as a family, a community healing and growing. And in that moment, everything changed. Let us keep supporting each other, just like Sarah and Blake did. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss out on these inspiring stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Comment below with your feelings about the ending. We want to hear from you. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformational journey. Your support means the world.